Hi, my name's Kim J and I'm a visually impaired chef. I'm also a volunteer for RNIB. Now for the last couple of years, as you all know, I've been making all these cookery videos and they've always been dishes that other people like, be it Indian food, Western food, cakes. So today I've decided to put my foot down and I am going to make one of my favourite dishes. Now this is going to surprise a lot of you. Believe it or not, it's cheese and onion pie, but it's like no other cheese and onion pie that you've ever had before, and trust me, it's well worth making. When I first started secondary school, and I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was, and trust me, it was a long time ago, the first thing they taught us in cookery class was how to make cheese on toast. Yeah, I know. But the second thing was how to make cheese and onion pie. Now for an Indian person, cheese and onion pie, never had it before and I loved it and have done ever since, but it was a boring cheese and onion pie. So I did a lot of research, tried a lot of different variations of cheeses, and I've come up with a variation of a cheese and onion pie which everybody in my family loves, and it's so simple to make. Now the ingredients you're going to need is flour, plain flour, which we're going to use to roll out the pastry, approximately 6 large white onions, which I'm going to peel, slice finely and put to the boil. Now, I usually use between 4 and 5 different cheeses. You can use more, you can use less, but the main cheese that you really do need is a really good mature cheddar, which I've got. So I've got a block of mature cheddar here. And I've also got some Wensleydale, which gives it that little bit of a peppery kick to the cheese onion pie. I've also got Port Salut, which is amazing because it's lovely and creamy. It just makes it luxurious. Now this one is Mexican cheese. You can use a different type of cheese, but I like Mexican because again, it just gives that slight kick to the pie. You're also going to need red Leicester. Not a lot of red Leicester, but you will need some less red Leicester. I've also got some brie here and some mozzarella, and all the cheeses have been grated. Now you're also going to need pastry. Now I'm not going to sit there and waste my time making pastry when you can buy it just as good from the shops. So I've got short crust pastry and I've got puff pastry. Now I've got ready rolled ones, so it's easy to do, but you don't need to get the ready rolled ones if you want to buy the block. And you're also going to need black pepper. Now you're also going to need a flan dish. Now I've got a large flan dish here. It's family size, approximately 27 centimetres in diameter. You can use smaller or bigger if you can find it. And I've also got small ones which are approximately 14 centimetres big. Now the reason that I have so much pastry and I have several flan dishes is because you're opening so many blocks of cheese. You don't want it to go to waste, and in our house it never goes to waste. So I always make a few and then freeze it, and it is perfect in the freezer for up to 6 months. And those are the ingredients for my cheese and onion pie. I've peeled and sliced the onions lengthways as fine as I can, and now I'm going to put it into a pan and on to boil, and I will boil it for approximately 20 minutes. I've boiled the onions for 20 minutes until they are translucent, and I know what everybody's going to ask is, how do you know they're translucent when you have a visual impairment? It's by the touch of it. Raw onions are hard, so when you kind of tap it with your spoon or a knife or a fork, you can feel the hardness, you can hear it. But translucent onions are soft and pliable. So now that they've been cooked until they're translucent, I'm going to drain the water and leave them to cool. I've got my flan dishes and I've liberally buttered them. If you want to stay a bit healthier, just oil them. And I've also got in front of me my pastry board, rolling pin, the flour and the short crust pastry. Now I always use short crust pastry at the bottom and puff at the top. it works really well. Now back in wartime, it was always short crust pastry, so the pie always felt really stodgy and heavy. So this way you get a much lighter pie and you get a nicer pastry for the top. Now I'm going to roll this pastry out until it's big enough to cover the bottom of this flan dish. Now you will find that quite often, as this has done, that pastry will slightly crack. If that's the case, just kind of mould it back together and then just very gently start rolling until it's the size that you want. I've rolled the pastry out so that it's roughly the size of the flan dish with extra to try and cover over. And what I'm going to do is, I've got my rolling pin and I've just put a little bit of pastry on top of the rolling pin to allow myself to lift the pastry off, put the flan dish underneath and then just cover the bottom of that flan dish. And what you want to do is you want to very gently tuck the pastry into the bottom of the edges, allowing a little bit of extra pastry to give. Now if you have a breakage, don't worry about it. Just take a little bit of pastry off from the edges and just mould it into the dish. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the excess pastry off from the sides, leaving approximately about a centimetre's worth of overhang over the edge. Now don't throw this excess pastry away because it's perfect to make more pies and even pasties if you want. Now that I have the short crust pastry on the bottom of the flan, I'm going to fill these pie dishes. So I've got my cheeses. Now like I said, it's up to you how many cheeses you want to use, but just to kind of show you the variations. And we start layering. So I start with that lovely mature cheddar and I sprinkle a layer of it on the top. Now I've got my cheeses here, I've got my onions and I've got my black pepper. Now that I've sprinkled a small layer on top, I'm going to put some of those onions on top. You don't want a lot, just a little. Now back in the 80s, 1980s, what they started to do is instead of boiling the onions, they used raw onions. And you could if you want, but what you find is you get a much sharper, bitter taste of the onions to a cheese pie, which I don't like, but some other people might do. So if you want a much stronger onion taste, don't boil the onions. Now next, I'm putting another layer, but this time I'm using the Wensleydale. Now it's only a fine layer because you've got a lot of cheeses here to build up. And you keep doing this with each cheese. And now I'm just going to sprinkle just a little bit of black pepper on top. You don't need salt because the cheese has salt. So just a bit of black pepper. A little bit of red Leicester. And already I can smell the cheeses and the onions and the black pepper. It is smelling delicious. And now I've got the Mexican. Now you don't want too much Mexican because like I said, it does give you a bit of a kick. So if you like the kick, it's fine. I'm now going to put some more onions. Now it depends on you on how much onions you want. I have the brie here, so the brie is like nice and creamy, so I'm just going to put dollops of it here and there, just so you get that creaminess when you bite into the pie. I always love doing this. It's just so therapeutic and so easy to do. Now that lovely pork salut, because it's creamy, it melts and it merges into the other cheeses, and it makes a cheese onion pie from a humble cheese onion pie to a gastro cheese onion pie. Always worth trying to get a creamy cheese like Port Salut or Stilton, a little bit more black pepper, some more onions, and I'm going to put some mozzarella on. Now, you only need a little bit of mozzarella. Again, this is up to you, but I like that feeling of slight stringiness when you eat a hot cheese onion pie that you can get from mozzarella. And you keep doing this until your pie dish is full of cheese to the rim. Keep layering and layering. I've laid up my cheeses and I've managed to get 2 large pies and 3 little ones. Now it depends on you. If you use only 3 blocks of cheese, you won't get as many pies, but because I had so many cheeses, I've managed to get quite a bit. We go to the next step, which is putting the puff pastry over the top of these pies. I've got my pastry board out, my rolling pin, the flour and the puff pastry, and my pies which have been filled. So I'm going to roll out my puff pastry like I did with the short crust pastry, so it's big enough to cover the top of the pie. Flour both sides and roll. Now during the summer sort of months, I tend to go to farm shops when I want to do a cheese and onion pie. Go to the farm shops, test the cheeses and get the best cheeses possible. And during the winter, I go to the European markets, and each time I make a cheese onion pie, it is always slightly different, and that's the beauty of it, but it always tastes nice. Now that I've rolled out this pastry, again, I'm going to do what I did last time, slightly hook the pastry onto my rolling pin, lift it up, lift the cheese and onion pie up, and just put the pastry on top, like so. Now I'm just slightly patting the pastry so it's fully covered all the way around, and then I'm going to seal it. Now the way I seal it is you can crinkle cut it, sort of just pinching the sides together so you get a lovely kind of crinkle shape all the way around, or if you like me, you could just use a fork and just fork the outer regions all the way around, and what you're doing is you're pinching the short crust pastry together with a puff pastry and sealing it. Now I've done that, I am going to cut and trim away the sides. I'm lifting the pie dish onto my left hand, I'm right-handed. I've got a sharp knife, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to skim it across the edge of the flan dish, and what you'll find is the pastry will just cut away. Now if you don't feel comfortable doing this, it's fine. Use a pair of scissors and trim it all the way back. And once you've done that, comes the fun bit. Now you could leave your pie just like that, a plain cheese onion pie, and I put a slit in the middle in order to let the steam out when I cook it, or you could decorate it. You could use anything you like, sort of mould shape out of the pastry. Biscuit cutters are great, or lattice cutters. So that's what I'm going to do with these pies. I'm going to put my puff pastry on top and decorate the top. Now if you've got children or grandchildren, get them to do it. They love it just as much. Now once I've done that, I am going to stick them into the fridge for at least an hour, because whilst you've been sort of decorating it and rolling out the pastry is relaxed. So you want it to be able to contract and go back to its normal size. So put it into the fridge for an hour before you cook it. Brush it with some oil or some egg, depending on you. And because there's such a lovely big batch, perfect to go into the freezer And for my family and I, we always have cheese and onion pie for the vegetarians on Christmas and on Easter. Well worth trying. I put the cheese and onion pie in the oven at 200 degrees for 30 minutes until the top is a beautifully golden brown, and there you go, my amazing gastro cheese and onion pie made with 5 cheeses. Now you have a recipe for a great dish, but when you're in the kitchen there are certain safety guides and rules that you should adhere to, and which keeps you safe. Now, one of the things that I do before I start cooking is I make sure that I've got shoes on that are sturdy with good grips. I make sure that there's nothing on the floor that I can trip over, and there are no spillages or liquid or condensation on the floor that makes it a bit of a hazard. Now, before cooking, the first thing that you do, as we all know, is wash our hands thoroughly. And especially when you're dealing with raw meat at every stage, wash your hands thoroughly. It stops cross-contamination. It keeps you and your family safe. When you're using the oven and the hob, know your oven and hob really well. Now, I use tactile markings so that I know exactly what temperature to put the oven on and what setting, so that I've not put the grill on when I should be putting the oven on. Now, with the hob, whenever you're sort of putting anything on the hob, make sure the handle is not sticking out. Now, I like to keep the handle at approximately 10 to 12. And the reason for that is it's not near enough to the unit for you to accidentally knock it off. It is not over another hob which may be on, so the handle's getting hot. So this is the safest position. Now, if you're boiling anything, be very, very careful. Don't fill the pan up too much. And if possible, use the boiler alert, which tells you when that liquid is bubbling away and it's hot, and it keeps you safe. If you're not comfortable with the hob and the oven, use the microwave whenever you can. It's a lot safer. And every time you are taking things out of the oven or from the microwave, because remember, plates and dishes get extremely hot in the microwave, use oven gloves. Now, I like to use thermal oven gloves. They're a lot safer. Don't be tempted to use tea towels or anything else. And they literally go to extreme temperatures, so you're very safe with them. Whenever you cut any food in the kitchen, use safe cutting methods. Keep the blade away from your fingers, so set it a couple of millimeters away from your fingers, and that way you're safe all the time. Now, if you're not confident with a knife, you can use appliances like food processors. Make sure you know how they work properly, and keep safe. And if you're still not confident, ask somebody else to do it. It is better to be safe than have an injury. If you have any cuts or you cut yourself whilst you're in the kitchen, put a plaster on it. And if you have a burn, run it under cold water. And if it's bad, you seek medical advice straight away. Whenever you cook meat, always ensure that the meat is thoroughly cooked, because you know, raw meat will give you food poisoning. Now, the best optimum temperature to cook meat is between 66 degrees and 73 degrees. Use a food thermometer if you're not too sure. They do have talking food thermometers, which you can get quite easily. And you store the meat as soon as you can. As soon as it's cooled down, store it straight away in the fridge, and read the advice on storage on the labels.